where you are on stage matters. Because back here at the back part of the stage means one thing. If you come up here close, then that means another thing. If you move from one side to the other, that's going to mean something, right? It all has a meaning to it. So back here, you can emotionally disengage from your audience, and they can emotionally disengage from you. You get more emotional if you get up close, right? As a matter of fact, an educator friend of mine shared with me this, that if somebody in your audience is being disruptive or talking or continuing to talk after the presentation has started, she says she just goes over and stands next to them, maybe puts a hand on their desk. She doesn't address them. She doesn't call them out. She just stands there. Your very presence, being that close to people, is it's very important. So if you can, you use that time as a more emotional time, and then this is a place to disconnect. So if I'm telling a story, and I get a chance to be really emotional with you, and you know what, Deanne? During that time, she got sicker, and she got sicker. But you also hear how, as I bring my voice down so I'm not as loud. So if I come back here, I may say, listen, we've got to fix these things. I have a chance to be big and bold when I'm back here. But down here, it's more intimate. And it's more like a conversation. So that helps. Knowing where that is on stage. Now, obviously on stage, you also want to address everybody. So if you have people over here, if you have people in the back, and if you have people over there, you want to make sure that you get to everybody so no one feels left out. But there's also a timeline on your floor. Now, you may not think about this, but if you say a really good format for a speech is then, now, and how. Then, now, and how. Because the audience reads backwards. This is past tense. This is present tense. And then that would be the future. So if I said, I used to be fat, or I used to have trouble with this, or we struggled with this for years. For years, we were not able to make any traction on this subject. And now, wow, we're in the 96th percentile on these three things. And then how did we go from there where we were having trouble to here where we're in such good shape? And now where do we go in the future? See, then, now, and how. The other recommendation that I've had, that I've seen people do, is make places mean something on your stage. For instance, if you're talking about measurement, you might say, have you ever stepped up on a scale and looked down at the number, and that number was not the number you were expecting? Have you ever stood there and looked at that scale and thought, that scale's wrong. It's not me. I couldn't possibly weigh that much. Now, as you step away from that, what's that point on the stage? It's the scale, right? So every time you step up here, you say, and so we were going to measure it, right? We were going to see what that measurement was, because we couldn't believe that that measurement was what it was. The same way, if you go over here and you say to your husband or your wife, you say, Donna, you know, I'm trying to do this, will you help me? Now that's where Donna is, right? And then if I go over here and I say to my boss, they say, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. I need to quit. Well, there's where my boss is, and there's where Donna is. And as I go through the story and I tell you what happened when I talked to my boss, or I tell you what happened when I talked to my wife, they're both in that place. And then here's the scale, right? And this is where things used to be, and this is where things are, and that's the future. And once you line out these things on the floor, or line out these spaces, then stay with them. I heard the story of a beginning speaker, and I certainly never saw him do this, but a beginning speaker who talked about being there at the graveside in his uncle's funeral, and the casket, and the way it glimmered in the sun. And you see, he kind of painted this picture as though it's right there. And then he went and he did other things in his story, and he came later and he went and had lunch. And you see what the problem is? In our mind, he's having lunch on his uncle's casket. But sometimes you'll tell stories and you'll be sort of up here close, and then you'll want to give everybody a chance to back up and take a breather and relax. And so this then is that point. It's like a chapter. It's between chapters. One chapter ends and the next chapter begins. So I'm telling you a story about what happens when we instituted AIDIT and how the pushback that we got and all the fighting that we had, and then suddenly it had great results and everybody was so excited. Could you feel the chapter change, right? You saw that chapter change. And so that's a good use of the stage as far as I can tell. Now, you can be in a story. So I'm telling him this, and then he's saying back to me, and we're in an argument, and you know, I'm certain that I'm right, and he's certain that he's right. And you know what? After a while, I realized he was right the whole time. Now, what I just did there is I have a story space, right? This is where my story is happening. We're arguing back and forth. And then I stepped out of it and I addressed you as an audience member as an aside, as almost a whisper. You know what I figured out? It was never him. It's always been me. And that was my opportunity to step out of the story and address you as an audience member. There's a lot more to where you use the stage, but you can really make it dynamically work for you if you'll just think about your spaces on it, what they mean, and then move with intent. One of the primary questions I get from people is, do I walk around too much? Am I moving too much? You should walk around and you should move, but it should mean something. I'm going to walk over and talk to my boss, or I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say something to my spouse, or I'm going to stop what I'm thinking, what I'm talking about, and I'm going to take a chapter heading, and I'm going to allow you a moment to absorb. I hope this is helpful. We'll have a lot more tips and techniques on stage direction because I think it's very important, and I'm really not finding a lot of sources out there that will help you with this like this will. Thanks, and as always, I welcome your feedback.